Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boy.
Hey heroes, Josh here from Panels to Pixels. And about 2 years ago, I started collecting toys and action figures. Yes, I'm what veteran toy collectors call the dreaded COVID collector. I mainly got into it through toy photography. That's how I know when my collection started, because I can go back and see when I posted my first photo on Instagram. But around that same time, I built what you can see behind me, this set for my videos, which I wanted to feel like a kind of kid's bedroom from the 90s and 2000s. You know, that's the whole vibe of my channel, is that kind of nostalgic superhero stuff. And you know, in the last 2 years, my collection has really grown and I've had a lot more stuff to display behind me in my videos. And a few people have commented to say, you know, can you give us a tour? Can you show us what you've got back there? So here I am. I've wanted to do this for a while, but you know, any toy collectors out there will know that your collection is always in flux. You know, things are coming, things are going, things need repairing, things need cleaning. But I freshly dusted all the shelves and I'm ready to show it to you. And not only do I want to show this stuff off, but I thought it might be a good time, 2 years into my toy collecting journey. You know, you kind of go through periods of expansion, rapid expansion in my case, and then periods of recession, which I feel like I'm kind of going into now, where you need to thin the collection out or you need to find your focus. So I'm going to share a little bit of my thought process around curating this collection, and also a few stories about how I got certain toys, or, you know, even a few lessons I've learned along the way. So enough preamble from me, let's get right into it. Well heroes, I'm taking you behind the camera for a view of the Panels to Pixels set that you don't normally get to see. And speaking of things you can't see, we're going to start up here on the top shelf, which is usually out of view of the camera. You'll have to excuse the floorboards creaking beneath me. But yeah, this is clearly a Turbo Man. This is the Funko re-release from a couple of years ago. And this was a gift from my wife last Christmas. You know, I'm a massive Jingle All The Way fan. Maybe you've seen the video on the channel about all the superhero Easter eggs in Jingle All The Way. It's my favourite Christmas movie. I've made my wife watch it every year since we've been together, much to her chagrin. And yeah, I was really hyped to get this. Now this figure poses a little bit of a quandary for me, because I'd really love to have it on display as part of the set, but it's so humongous in its box that it doesn't really fit anywhere on any of my shelves. So it's the age-old question. I'm not really a mint on card collector, as you'll see, but I feel like the box is kind of part of the vibe for this, because it represents the kind of the search for the toy in the film. But do I open it? I figure if I open it, I could have it over here next to the lava lamp. It might look cool there, and then it would be seen on video, but who knows? Next to Turbo Man, I literally just got this a couple of days ago. This is the Marvel Legends Mojo. Yeah, what a disgusting creep this is. I'm not even really sure I want this in my house, but it's a cool figure. Just kind of gross to look at. He's chilling on top here because I haven't really found a spot for him yet. Next to that, in case you're curious, is my hair light, which for my videos, so this goes behind me and just adds a little bit of light, backlighting, I suppose, to separate me from the background. But to be honest, more than 50% of the time I forget to turn it on, so you don't even really see it in my videos very often. Okay, moving on to the first shelf proper, and this is the Marvel Legends Retro 375 collection. And this was really pivotal to my action figure collecting, because this was the first line that I kind of went all in on. This line of 80s Kenner Star Wars inspired figures went on sale during the pandemic, and I just fell for them. I really fell head over heels in love with them. I was obsessed with them, and collecting them during the pandemic was really cathartic for me. I made a lot of late night trips out to 24-hour supermarkets to avoid other shoppers in the middle of the night, and finding one that I didn't have yet and adding it to my collection. You know, it really, well, one, it gave me the bug for toy collecting, and two, it just gave me something to focus my attention on during the pandemic. So I really love these figures. I'm missing a few because I kind of got interested in other things and dropped off a little bit, but they're very special to me. I've got them ordered loosely by team affiliation or just kind of, you know, genre, I suppose. So up front we've got the Avengers plus Spider-Man as a kind of honorary Avenger. And yeah, these figures are, as I said, 80s inspired, 3.75 inch scale, 5 points of articulation. They're actually 7 points of articulation, but I consider them to be, you know, in line with Star Wars, so I consider them 5 points of articulation. I don't mess around with the wrist too much. I'd prefer if those joints weren't there, to be honest. Because part of my obsession with these was kind of an obsession with them being era specific and era correct to the 80s. So as you see there, my Vision sports a custom cloth cape, which I made myself. I even learned to sew for these figures. That's how obsessed I got with them. Yeah, that was based off a Lando Calrissian cape. from the Star Wars line, the vintage Star Wars line. I didn't get around to making one for Thor yet, but you'll see a vinyl cape inspired by kind of like Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi and stuff like that later. So yeah, up front we've got the Avengers, the Fantastic Four plus the Silver Surfer, kind of street level and villains back there, and then these are kind of alternate versions or kind of, you know, variants, I suppose, plus Nova. He doesn't really go anywhere else. A couple of highlights from this line. I really like the Hulk, Spider-Man and Cap I've got up front because I think those are some of the best versions of those characters we've ever received in plastic. They're super iconic. I really like any of the translucent plastic types, like the Human Torch there, and we'll see Iceman in a little bit. Yeah, big fan of this line. Moving on from the 80s into the 90s, and this was a collection that I, you know, as soon as I got into toy collecting, I was like, I need to start picking some of these up. This was, again, an early obsession for me. This is the 90s Toy Biz X-Men. As I think I mentioned in the intro to this video, I grew up on 90s Marvel Toy Biz, and I kind of dropped off collecting as a kid, right around the time that Marvel Legends were coming in. So these early kind of figures are really what it's all about for me. And I managed to get almost all of these for a really good price on card, and had the pleasure of releasing them from the plastic prisons myself. Back there we got Forge. He's got the clear plastic leg, which I really like. I'm a sucker for clear plastic. We kind of got a lot of the blue and yellow X-Men guys there. Got a Wolverine. He is really the headliner of the line for me. He's one of the most iconic designs, one of the most iconic figures of the 90s. But unfortunately, everyone I've found has had like super gloopy paint on the face. And I think that's just a quirk of the line, but he suffers from it very badly. So I'm kind of on the lookout for another one with better face paint. It's kind of sticky and tacky to the touch. And I know you can kind of do things about that. You can give them a rinse with dish detergent, which I've tried, or you can brush on baby powder. But yeah, I'd really like to find one still on card with nicer face paint. That Sabretooth is a really cool figure, and he's got the glow-in-the-dark eyes, and I really like his action feature. We've got all the X-Force characters up front. You know me, I'm a massive Rob Liefeld fan. So we've got Shatterstar there, GW Bridge, Gideon, and up front we've got Cable, of course, the main man. That's such a cool figure. What a great design, that original X-Force design. So iconic. Next to him, we've got Weapon X Wolverine, another great design, another timeless 90s X-Men moment. And then we've got an Iceman. This is one of the original ones, which I think changed colour in the freezer. And these are notoriously hard to find, not discoloured, because the thermoplastic or whatever that they used has gone yellow on almost every one of these you see. This is the least kind of piss yellow, urine yellow coloured one I could find. So he looks okay, but really it's not a very aesthetically appealing figure at this point. I also read on a forum that maybe the colour changing plastic that they used is carcinogenic, as the kind of plasticizers leach out of it. So I'm always a bit frightened about touching him. But you know, he's part of the line, he's an iconic part of the line. Just before we talk about that Spider-Man figure, just to mention about the X-Men, my aim for these is to collect all of the ones released here in Europe, which is actually a different checklist than what was released by Toy Biz in the US. We got way less figures over here, so I'm just going for the main ones that were released here in Europe because, one, it's a smaller collection, they're easier to get hold of here and cheaper, and really those are the ones that, you know, I have nostalgia for, because those are the ones I was seeing in catalogues and things like that. So if you're interested, I'm about just over halfway to finishing that kind of checklist. But you know, we've got the Spidey up here as well. This is the 1992 Toy Biz Marvel Superheroes. I think they call it multi-jointed action pose Spider-Man or something like that. This is actually a later re-release with a more animated style head. I think this was packed in, I think they released this a few times, but this particular one was packed in with the Spider-Man car, which I talked about in my Superhero Toys of Christmas Past video. Still haven't got one of those cars. I don't think I will, to be honest, because I haven't got the space for it. But it was cool to find this figure for reasonably cheap, and he represents like an important part of Spider-Man history, Spider-Man toy history certainly, because that body was the first superposable Spider-Man figure, way before Spider-Man Classics or Marvel Legends or anything like that. Yeah, he's built like a G.I. Joe, exactly like a G.I. Joe. He's got a rubber O-ring in his torso. Yeah, and he's surprisingly posable. He looks cool. I brought one of my studio lights over because it was looking a bit dim, but here we get to the Spawn shelf. Yes, 90s Spawn, that's what we're all about. So up front we've got a couple of original 1994 figures from the first wave of Spawn figures from McFarlane. Overt Kill, obviously, Rob Liefeld mark over here. had to get Overkill because of the Rob Liefeld and Stan Lee lineage to the character, and Medieval Spawn, who's just such a cool figure. Great colour there with that kind of midnight blue and the green eyes. Really like that figure. Yeah, I'd like to get all of that first wave of Spawn figures, although I do want to contain my Spawn collection to this one shelf, and it's already looking quite crowded because of this guy back there. He commands a lot of space. That is the 2020 Kickstarter Classic Spawn, and I got this before I was really collecting action figures, just because I thought it was a good deal, and I was into Spawn, and I thought it would make like a cool shelf piece, but it's kind of become the centerpiece of an entire Spawn collection. I have some other stuff as well. I've got a Gunslinger Spawn and a Mandarin Spawn that I've photographed, but I'm kind of keeping this to the 90s style stuff, so they don't really fit on the shelf at the moment. Oh, and back there is Vanish issue 1. It's the kind of chromium NYCC variant, I think, signed by artist Greg Capullo, Spawn artist. This was a gift from fellow YouTuber and good friend of mine, Diego Rivera. Yeah, I went to New York on my honeymoon and he very kindly gifted me this. And honestly, I was blown away by it, really appreciate that, and it's got pride of place over here in my Spawn collection. Diego Rivera, by the way, the creator of Spawn Timber, so of course, it had to go on the Spawn shelf. By the way, I wanted to keep this strictly to toys, but if you're interested in hearing me talk about my book and like trade paperback and comic collection, let me know down in the comments below, because that's definitely a video I can make. Yeah, I'm doing my own sound effects now. Here we are at the X-Men shelf, and yeah, so here's the rest of my Marvel Legends Retro 375 figures. There wasn't enough space on one shelf, so I've had to designate them to their own X-Men shelf. There's that vinyl cape on Magneto there. I really like that because, again, you know, Magneto was the first bad guy released in the line, and this kind of gives him some lineage with the Kenner Darth Vader. That Iceman is stunning in the blue. Don't you just want to eat that? It looks like a Fox's Glacier Mint. If you're in the UK, you'll know what one of those are.
Cool, clear, refreshing Fox's Glacier Mints. Clearly a better mint.
Got Storm and Cyclops, of course, the team leaders up front. Firestar is a, you know, technically a mutant, not necessarily a member of the X-Men. And then Wolverine and Jean Grey in her Dark Phoenix guise. Back there as well, I'm kind of doing this in a weird order, but I've got the 2-pack Wolverine and Jean Grey. I've kept them in the kind of shipping sleeve for the time being because I want to get some acrylic cases to put them in, just because I'm keeping them on card because of those shiny chrome cards are so cool, man. And the last little piece for now of the Marvel Legends Retro 375 collection is this Sentinel, which is so awesome. It's got kind of light pipe eyes, so you can't really see it right now, but if you get a light right behind him, his eyes glow red. It's really cool, great figure. I picked this up in New York from Midtown Comics. It was kind of my souvenir from the trip, from the honeymoon. So yeah, special sentimental value to that figure. I really like it. These two are the Marvel Legends 20th anniversary X-Men movie figures, and these were some of the first modern Hasbro Marvel Legends figures I picked up, and I feel like they kind of gave me a false standard of expectations about Marvel Legends, because I feel like everyone I've picked up has disappointed me ever since these, maybe just because they're so good, and they really are fantastic. That Mystique, you know, you can still find her clearanced at a lot of places, but that's such a good figure. I felt like a bit of a creep buying it at the time. Yes, one figure of the blue naked lady, please. But even so, you get that classic 2000 version of Mystique, and it's a really nicely detailed and painted figure, great likeness on it. And speaking of great likenesses, you know, have to mention the Hugh Jackman likeness on this Wolverine figure. Again, just such a great figure, loads of great detail, great likenesses, really fun to play around with. Back there, if you can see beyond the glare of the light, we have my birth issue of Uncanny X-Men. So that's July 1992, and I found this in a 50p bin, so like 50 cents equivalent, and amazingly, it's my birth issue. It features my favourite X-Men character, Storm, on the front cover. It's by one of my favourite artists, Will Sportatio, one of the Image founders, and not only that, but it just happened to be signed, if you can see it past Wolverine's legs there, it's signed by artist Will Sportatio. So yeah, really cool to get that. I'm really happy it's part of the collection. Next to that, we have a kind of MCU prop replica display. I'm sort of into collecting prop replicas. They take up a lot more space and they're a lot more expensive, but whenever I can, and if I can get something quite accurate, then I'll pick it up. Not super accurate, but that's the Hasbro Iron Man helmet. I picked this up a few years ago on an Amazon Prime deal, and you know, it's kind of cool. It's very plasticky, it's very oversized and big, and I'm glad I got it for a deal because I don't think it's worth the retail price. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I was actually going to return it, but then I put it on the shelf as part of the set. And with the spotlight shining down like that, it looks cool on video, so I'm glad I kept hold of it. Next to him is the ZD Toys, or ZD Toys in the US, Iron Man Mark III armor from the first film. And I picked this up off AliExpress. This was my first experience kind of with import figures, and it was super cheap. It's like the same price as a Marvel Legends figure, but really nicely detailed. Like the paint on it, all the details are there. The paint, you've got that like cherry red, and you can see, you know, they match quite well, the colours. He's got the LED in the chest that lights up. He's not super easy to pose, but I've taken some cool photos with him, especially one I took a few Christmases ago. In front of him is my Mark I arc reactor, which I built from a kit, again just like a cheap kit that you can get on AliExpress. I actually went to great lengths to accurize this. You can see in there's like electrical components and stuff and that aren't part of the kit, but every now and then I get obsessed with something like this. I just go so hard into the research phase of something, and I spent a long time looking at references and making this as screen accurate as possible. I actually didn't finish it. There are supposed to be like wires and stuff soldered across all the coils, but that was going to be a lot of soldering, and I think I just lost a little bit of steam. Eventually, that's a problem for future Josh. Eventually, I'll get around to finishing that off. Up front and center is this. It's the EFX Hydra pin that was worn by the Red Skull in Captain America: The First Avenger. Iron Man and Cap: The First Avenger are probably my two favorite MCU movies, and this is cast off a screen use prop. It's super cheap, I think you can still pick these up reasonably cheap, so it's a cool prop to have. Again, because it's cast off a screen use badge, so it's cool to have in the collection. It's a cool little prop. And then we have my Awesome Mix Volume 1. You know, I mentioned about how I get obsessed with things, and this was one of my obsessions. This is a screen accurate Awesome Mix Volume 1 that I made myself. I found the right brand of tape, the exact brand of tape that's used in the film. I printed off my own labels. I hand wrote the lettering there, the Awesome Mix Volume 1. Trying to match it as close as possible to what you see in the film, and I weathered it a little bit. I think I could have weathered it a little bit more. I think the one in the film is a bit dirtier and it's got some more kind of worn edges, but still it looks cool. I think I even went to the trouble of recording. Oh, maybe I shouldn't admit that. I didn't do that. I'm not a music pirate. Hi, it's me again. I'm back to talk about something that I don't talk about very often in my videos because I don't want to ruin the flow of them. But, you know, it is important, it helps the channel a lot, and that is the Panels to Pixels Patreon. Not too long ago, I gave my Patreon page a complete overhaul so that everything is available at the $1 tier. All the tiers get the same. And the reason I did that is because I wanted it to be as accessible as possible to people. I've been doing Panels to Pixels for 5, going on 6 years now, and you know, that's a lot of free content, but I love doing it. It's a labor of love. I'm happy to put that content out there. It'll always be free for the people who want to enjoy it. But if you want to support the channel, you can do so for just $1. It really does go a long way. You know, if you look back from the beginning of the channel to now, you see the camera upgrades. Above me right now is a boom mic that I bought with money from people who supported me on Patreon. Every dollar I get, I reinvest it into making my videos as good as they possibly can be, because quality is so important to me. And even the set behind me, which is what this video is all about, you know, probably wouldn't exist, at least in part, without the support of my Patreon members. So yeah, that's the hard sell. I'll give you the address. It's patreon.com/panels2pixels. And up there, you know, you can get special roles in the Discord server. Obviously, you get extra content, early access to videos. I've started doing something called creator commentaries, which is where I do a kind of commentary track for some of my most involved and kind of most polished videos. And even some rejected stuff, like I started a video about AI recently, which kind of went some places that I wasn't really happy with, so I've put what remains of that video up on the Patreon. So hey, even if you've just listened to this and you've decided not to support me, that's fine. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. I appreciate everybody who clicks on my videos and comments and shares and things like that. It really does help support me, but thanks for considering supporting the channel on Patreon. Back to the video. And here we have the Marvel Legends shelf. Kind of Marvel Legends, there's some interlopers there from other companies like Marvel Select and Mafex. The idea with this shelf was to create the Marvel Universe as I was first introduced to it in the late 90s and early 2000s. So, you know, we've had 80s with the first shelf and 90s with the X-Men shelf. I think of this as like the Heroes Reborn era with like the Avengers by Kurt Busiek and George Perez. That was really the era where my comic collecting got serious. Back there's the 2020 retro carded Spider-Man. I bought that with the intention of opening it. I didn't want to keep it on the card, but I just never got around to it. And then they became kind of valuable, so I felt bad about opening it. I think the price has come down on those now, but I just figure I've got a better Spider-Man figure, I'm not in love with that Spider-Man figure. I don't think it represents my ideal version of Spider-Man, but I really like the card. It's, you know, it's obviously got that 90s Spider-Man the Animated Series card back. So he's going to stay on his card for a while. In front of him, we've got Jim Lee's Storm in the black costume, because if you've seen my video on 90s comic costumes that are good, actually, you'll know that I am a firm believer that Storm's costume is supposed to be black leather. You know, it may look white, and certainly the cartoon made it look white, but it's black leather in my opinion. And if you disagree with me, then tell me in the comments below and we'll have a fight about it. No, I'm just kidding. Let's not fight about it. But yeah, that's a cool Storm figure. Probably the only Storm figure I'll ever need, even though, like I said, she's my favourite X-Men character. Let's do the rest of my X-Men figures here. We've got the Jim Lee Beast. This is my favourite Marvel Legends figure, I think. It's just really well designed. I love that Jim Lee head sculpt. I know a lot of people take issue with it. I'd like to get the updated version with the lab coat, but it's been kind of tricky to find. Well, I think I just missed my opportunity.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
I actually paid way over the odds for this figure because it came out in like 2018, I think, and obviously I wasn't collecting then, but I'm happy to have it. And then this is the Wolverine from the Love Triangle 3-pack with Jean Grey and Cyclops. I bought the 3-pack, sold the other 2. Kind of regret it now, but yeah, all I really wanted was this kind of Jim Lee style Wolverine. And again, other Wolverines have come and gone. I'm excited about the animated one that's coming out soon. I just pre-ordered that, but this Wolverine's been great for my collection. Back there we've got the Marvel Select Immortal Hulk, or Rampaging Hulk as he was originally called, and this was very hard to get in the UK for a long time. I don't know what it's like now, but I had 2 pre-orders cancelled when it was originally coming out, and then all the supply issues happened during the pandemic. This came out right at the time when all the boats were locked up and stuff. Yeah, I had 2 pre-orders cancelled, and then I had it on back order from another retailer for over a year, and I just abandoned all hope of it ever arriving, and eventually it just turned up on my door one day. This is the best Hulk figure ever made, in my opinion. This is just super iconic, that kind of like 70s Sal Buscema style, but not too 70s, you know, he doesn't have the sideburns or anything like that, but yeah, just a really, really great Hulk figure, really lovely details. In front of him, we've got Ben Grimm, aka The Thing. Got to have some Jack Kirby representation in there. Yeah, cool figure. In front of that, we've got, again, speaking of Jack Kirby, we've got Captain America. In my opinion, the perfect Captain America figure doesn't exist yet. I feel the head sculpt on this one is not my version of Captain America. He looks a little bit too angry. Maybe the eye holes are quite small, and it makes him look like he's, you know, really furrowing his brow. But yeah, cool figure. I don't want to dog on it too much, and I was happy to get it. We've got the modular Iron Man, again, you know, big 90s fan here, so this is my perfect version of the Iron Man armor. I think I will get the new one that's just come out, because again, that's that kind of Heroes Reborn era, so I'll grab that. But cool, got to have some Iron Man in there. And then lastly, the Mafex Spider-Man. And this was a recent acquisition for me. You know, the most I've ever spent on an action figure, and I'm kind of scared to even look at him at this point because I don't want anything to fall off him or break. It's a really cool figure though. Obviously you've got those big 90s Mark Bagley style eyes, not Todd McFarlane. Some people say these are Todd McFarlane eyes, but he draws his eyes in a very distinctive shape. These are much more Mark Bagley in my opinion. The colours on this, the shading, the detail, the articulation, everything about it. I think this is the best Spider-Man figure ever made, in my opinion. I just wish it didn't cost so much. Okay, we're getting down to the kind of the Castaway Shelves here. These are the shelves that don't have lights in them. They're not visible as part of my video background, so maybe they get a little bit neglected, but it's still really cool stuff to talk about here. So back there we've got some He-Man and Skeletor from Masters of the Universe Origins. I really like the Origins toy line. To me, they represent kind of the perfect modern action figures because they're not too articulated. Marvel Legends and stuff like that, and especially Mafex, sometimes gives me a bit of a headache with how much articulation. And if you're not great at posing like me, you spend a lot of time just getting them to just stand up and look good. But these figures look good no matter what you do with them. They're really beautiful and brightly coloured. You know, they obviously evoke those classic 80s designs, and they're just great modernizations of those classic action figures. If I was an 80s kid and not a 90s kid, I imagine I would be going all in on this toy line. But I don't have any nostalgia or emotional attachment. I just think they're cool toys. Speaking of kind of 80s into 90s toy lines, that I was a little bit too young to really get into as a kid, but certainly they were around. My older siblings were into them. The Ninja Turtles, and these are the classic reissues. I felt like I needed to have some turtle representation in my collection, so I got the reissues because I'm happy to just pay and get complete figures with all the accessories rather than spending ages finding vintage ones just to plonk on my shelf and represent the turtles. Quite happy with these. A few people have pointed out when I did have these on display as part of my set that I only have 3. I'm missing Michelangelo, obviously. Just haven't found him for a reasonable price. I don't want to pay over the odds for him. So eventually, hopefully I'll find a Michelangelo and the 4 brothers will be complete. Next to those guys is a recent obsession for me. It's the Star Wars Black Series from Hasbro, the kind of 6-inch figures. And I never thought I would get into 6-inch Star Wars figures. I'm obviously more into the vintage, the 5 POA, smaller scale figures. But I noticed that a lot of these were going on clearance around me. A lot of the big toy retailers here in the UK were selling these for ridiculously cheap. Like, I couldn't pass up. The first one I got was Greedo, and I think I paid like £7 for him. You'd be lucky to get a pint of beer in some places in the UK for £7 right now. And Greedo is one of my favourite kind of designs from Star Wars. So I got him, and then followed very closely by Bouche. Bouche Leia. Well, Bouche is actually my favourite design from Star Wars. Like, I had the Power of the Force 2 version as a kid, and I just think the helmet design is my favourite Star Wars thing. And my favourite Star Wars movie is Return of the Jedi. My favourite scene in Star Wars is the Jabba's Palace scene. So I picked up Dengar, who, he has a blink and you'll miss it kind of appearance in Jabba's Palace. There is a Rodian, it's not Greedo, but there are other Rodians who look like Greedo in Jabba's Palace. And I think my plan going forward is just going to be to pick up kind of Jabba's Palace denizens, maybe a few Cantina creatures, but yeah, kind of just put together a little bit of a Jabba's Palace kind of display. But the main attraction here is the vintage kind of Star Wars, and it's kind of a weird assortment of stuff. I was really fortunate. A friend of mine, his mum was clearing out her house and found a bunch of Empire Strikes Back figures. So Lobot, Hoth Leia, a Stormtrooper, and Zuckuss back there, or Forlom as he was known at the time. They're like minty mint. Like, that Stormtrooper is crazy minty. And she just said, I've heard you're into toys, do you want these? And I said, absolutely. I offered her some money, but she didn't take it. But yeah, so once I had those, I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to pick up some more vintage Star Wars. And that kind of set me off there. I picked up a Lando back there because this seems to be going in a bit of an Empire Strikes Back direction. I got this Vader and restored it myself. So part of my toy collecting journey has been discovering lots of toy YouTubers. And one of my favorite ones to watch is Toy Polloy here on YouTube. And he kind of has videos on restoring a lot of vintage toy lines, but there's some great ones on Star Wars. And he suggests that if you want to get into restoring vintage Star Wars, Vader is a really good one to start with because he's got a fairly simple paint scheme on the chest. So I repainted his chest there. I got a really beat up Vader figure, cleaned it up, gave him a new cape and a reproduction lightsaber. You can sound off if you disagree with reproduction weapons in the comments below. I don't really care. But yeah, his chest paint didn't come out super clean. I think I'm going to redo that. But for a first attempt, yeah, it was a cool project. A couple of 3POs back there. I love vac metalized toys. You don't see them very much nowadays, but I had to get these. Super nostalgic. That's the original Empire Strikes Back. So like vintage Kenner, removable limbs version. And this is by a maker called Stan Solo, I think. He used to be on Etsy, but I think he might have come off there now. But search for Stan Solo. He makes lots of cool reproduction Star Wars and like kind of modern figures and characters from the original trilogy who never got a figure, or like variations of classic figures. This is his Yavin Ceremony C-3PO with a more screen accurate gold. It's kind of more of a bronze really, and a silver leg, which the original doesn't have the silver leg detail. So yeah, just because I love C-3PO as a character, and I think this is a cool figure, I picked up a kind of a modern reproduction as well as an original. This Boba Fett is a reproduction. It's part of the Hasbro Retro Collection. I just wanted a super clean Boba Fett, and he fits right in. He's one of the better Retro Collection figures that Hasbro have made. Speaking of the Retro Collection, we've got a couple of Mandalorian figures there. I'm not sure if these will stick around really because I kind of want to focus on original trilogy stuff. But I like the Mandalorian Season 1, and these are 3 of the more iconic characters from that series. Obviously the Mandalorian Grogu, or Baby Yoda as we called him back then, and IG-11, is it? Or I get mixed up between the IG droids. But yeah, I do like what Hasbro have been doing with the retro collection, kind of doing modern, new media stuff in the retro kind of style. And speaking of figures in the retro kind of style, the first company to really blow the doors off that as a marketing tool for selling new toys was Super 7, and with their reaction line, and they partnered with Funko to create these alien figures that were based on prototypes by Kenner back in 1978, I guess. So yeah, love Alien, one of my favourite movies of all time. Got this this reaction figure just as a bit of alien representation. And another reaction figure is the Universal Monsters Dracula there. Again, I want to get the whole line of these Universal Monsters, but reaction figures are kind of pricey. You know, they're more kind of collector's items than they are toys. But these are kind of reminiscent of the Remco Universal Monsters figures from the 80s. Yeah, and they're cool. Vinyl cape again, really cool. Yeah, I'm going to get the rest of these. Okay, I've just talked about Star Wars way too long on a superhero channel. So let's get back into some superheroes. This is my kind of DC shelf, and you know, it's no secret to anybody who watches my channel that I'm way more of a Marvel and Image fan than I am DC. So I've kind of limited this to Batman and Superman, mostly Batman. I obviously grew up with Batman the Animated Series as a kid, so I've got some representation there. I've got an original Kenner combat belt Batman from the Animated Series line. Spent a long time looking for one of these in decent nick for not too much money, because this is kind of a valuable figure now. Managed to find one at a toy fair for not too much money. You know, there are like thousands of these still around. They made so many. This was the flagship figure from that line, from a very successful cartoon series in the 90s, and yet they seem to go for a ridiculous amount of money on eBay. But I found this one for a couple of quid. He's in decent shape. What I look for with vintage Batman figures especially is if the chest emblem is still there and the face paint is still there. Anything else can be touched up, you know, a bit of black paint here and there on the feet and the hands, that's no problem. He's also missing his cape, but I've become quite well versed in making these Kenner style capes, so I'm happy to make a reproduction when I get around to it. Behind him, kind of from vintage to modern, this is the DC Collectibles, or DC Direct, I can't remember, Batman, The Adventures Continue Batman, which is essentially the animated series Batman with some cell shading. Really cool figure, looks awesome, looks exactly like the cartoon. It's cool seeing these two together, seeing how toys have evolved. Again, I'm going in a bit of a weird order here, but let's go to the back with the McFarlane Superpowers Batwing. This was just such a cool announcement when this toy line first came around. Seeing the old 80s Kenner Superpowers line continue. I think, as a lot of collectors have pointed out, the figures have been a bit hit and miss. They don't really capture that original Superpowers vibe, but the vehicles have just been a knockout. And I'm just amazed that any company is making vintage style vehicles like these for the price. Yeah, just a really cool toy. And it's really cool to get like a box. I've displayed it with the box there because it's just cool to get Superpowers branded stuff in 2022, which is when this came out. Let's jump to the front and do Superman here, because this is part of that Superpowers line. Really, I got him as a stand-in for a vintage Superman, which I haven't been able to find a decent one at a decent price. So this figure's a bit of a stand-in, but he looks cool. I like how the head sculpt is more modern and reminiscent of McFarlane's own DC Multiverse Superman, which we'll see in a little bit. I had to replace that cape though. This is a cape that I made myself. I learned how to make the capes exactly like the original Superpowers figures, and he looks all the better for it. Yeah, I spent a long time getting the material to match the originals and making a clip for the neck myself, but he looks great. Okay, let's do some DC Multiverse from McFarlane. Yeah, I've got a bunch of these figures. This is obviously the Dark Knight Returns Frank Miller style, and I think that is my favourite Batman that Todd McFarlane has produced. He's got super long legs for some reason. I think that's a problem a lot of these figures suffer with, but you know, if you pose him in the right way, he doesn't look too bad. I absolutely love that head sculpt. That to me is like exactly what Frank Miller's artwork looks. It's kind of a backhanded compliment to Frank Miller, this figure, because it is fugly, very ugly Batman, but yeah, looks great. Behind him, speaking of figures that nail an artist-specific look, and I really like that McFarlane does that. I wish like Marvel Legends would do more artist-specific stuff rather than kind of homogenous, generic versions of characters. But you've got the Jim Lee Hush Batman there, and I've kind of talked about my maybe distaste for Jim Lee's kind of generic look in the past, but I really like his Batman, his version of Batman. I really like Hush. I know it's kind of a basic comics bro comic to be into, but I really like it. It's a cool little mystery story. And this looks exactly like Jim Lee's artwork. The head sculpt is perfect in my opinion, and I like the slightly different colours, the more teal blue, and the kind of the grey almost has like a brown to it when you see it. Yeah, it's cool. Another Jim Lee figure, ostensibly. This is the Action Comics 1000 Superman, and for my money this is still the best Superman that McFarlane has produced. That head sculpt is a perfect Superman for me. It's stoic. I don't know if it's having a hard time focusing, but yeah, it's stoic. It looks heroic. It's stoic and heroic. It's Superman. He's got a cloth cape that I made myself, because the one thing I didn't like about that figure and a lot of the early McFarlane DC figures is they had these kind of ridiculous, very plasticky, very hard capes that just weren't fun to pose around. They weren't fun to photograph, and that's a priority for me. Obviously, I'm a toy photographer, so it was super easy. Made this cape, tucked it into some holes that I drilled into his shoulders. Yeah, it looks great. The last of my DC Multiverse figures for now, until I get that new Nightfall Batman and a few others that I'm eyeing up at the moment. And obviously, oh man, the Batman and Robin George Clooney figures. Those are definitely going to be part of this shelf at some point. But this is the Arkham Asylum video game figure. Yeah, this is just a perfect representation of that suit. I really like the suit in that first game. It's my favourite of all the Arkham games. He's still got the trunks. That's critical for Batman in my opinion. He's got the long ears, which reminds me of kind of 90s Batman comics. And yeah, just super, built like a brick shithouse. Cool cape that drapes all the way to the floor. Kind of a weirdo. He's a weird looking Batman, and I dig that. He's creepy. And Batman should be creepy, except for this little guy. He's just adorable. I watched the Lego Batman movie not too long ago for the first time since the movie first came out, and I was amazed by how much I enjoyed it more the second time. I was really blown away by it. I think the humour landed a lot more for me, and as soon as the movie was over, I hit eBay and was like, I need to get a Lego Batman movie figure for my collection. So yeah, I was able to find one of those little poly bags for I think $2.99 or something like that, and he's just representing the Lego Batman movie. And the last little thing is the little Watchman button. Again, in terms of weird obsessions I've gone through, at a certain point I decided I wanted a comic accurate Watchman button, and I went down the rabbit hole of I bought so many off eBay and things. Now in Alan Moore's original script pages for Watchmen, he describes the button as being 1 inch in diameter, but obviously Dave Gibbons draws it's much closer to 2 inches. So I went for this bigger version, one because it shows up better on my shelf, but I still feel like I haven't found the perfect one. The blood splatter doesn't look great on this version, it looks very printed. I'd like to find a version of this button. Again, I've bought so many of these, it's ridiculous. But I'd like to find one that is the exact smiley face, but without the blood, and then maybe paint the blood on myself to make it look a bit more realistic. But, do you know, it's a weird thing, because if you just buy smiley face badges, they're not exactly like the Watchmen design. They're more like the kind of 90s ecstasy culture badges, which is a slightly different smiley face. So again, I may have to mock up my own version on Photoshop and have them made myself. Again, a weird obsession I went through. I'm kind of out of it now, so I don't even really care that much. But yeah, got some Watchmen on the DC shelf. Moving along to a kind of a messy shelf, but it's the start of a Batman 89 collection. And yeah, it's kind of a bit disorganized chaos at the moment. But up front, we've got a Kenner Dark Knight collection Batman. Is this what? I forget all the names. It's called Crime Attack. I think he's called Crime Attack. He's the basic black suit Batman, and yeah, he looks great. I was really happy to find one of these in decent condition. I paid very little for this figure because his ears were all bent and looked like they'd been chewed up by a dog or something. But they were all there, and I just put it in some hot water, and they've kind of popped back to life, and he looks good. He's got a good cape and everything. All of the ears on these old figures are kind of gnarled up, and the plastic was never super sharp or super well sculpted or anything, so I think that's fine. Maybe if I find a nice one, I'll replace him. A couple more Kenner Keaton Batmans over here, just while I'm talking about that line. We've got the, I think this was called Laser Batman or Laser Armor Batman, and then this is Tech Shield, I think. Yeah, so these are from the Dark Knight collection, or I think, actually maybe that one, no, the laser one is from the Batman Returns movie. So yeah, kind of got silver and gold. These are the only variants I really need. Once you start getting into Arctic Batman and Deep Dive and all the other wacky colorways. They're cool, and you could have a whole collection of those, but for me, I think black, silver and gold, I'm happy. I really like the laser one because that's like a unique sculpt and it's just very bizarre. I like to refer to him as Waffle Suit Batman. But yeah. If it looks a bit dusty over here, by the way, I did just dust these shelves, but if you're interested, if you're kind of obsessive like I am and interested in having a perfectly dust-free collection, I really don't recommend having black shelves or any kind of black toys because it just is a dust magnet. As soon as you finish dusting, like I just have, all that dust that you've whipped up will settle again on all of your black shelves, so it's kind of annoying. But anyway, back there we've got the Toy Biz movie Batman, and that was the original figure that was released in 1989 alongside the movie. And he's kind of not a great figure, not a great likeness. You can see why Toy Biz lost the Batman license. But as I said, I'm a kid of the 90s and a big Marvel fan, and this was the first figure line that Toy Biz made. So he's very important to the lineage of Marvel toys and eventually Marvel Legends. Without this guy, I dare say there would be no Marvel Legends. So aside from just being a cool Batman 89 figure, he's very important in superhero toy history. Up front here, we've got the Jada Toys 1/24 scale 1989 Batman. And yeah, just a cool, I'm never going to have space for the big McFarlane one that's just come out. This is a super iconic Batmobile, maybe my favourite, I don't know. I quite like the Forever Batmobile as well, so I'm going to get one of those because Jada also made that in 1/24 scale. But this is just a beautifully detailed die-cast model with moving parts, and it looks awesome. They're great for the price. I really recommend these. I didn't talk about a couple of the Hot Wheels toys I have over here. But I've got like the Blackbird Jet and the Spider-Man Spider Buggy, and Jada Toys actually just came out with a 1/24 scale version of the Spider Buggy. It's super goofy car, important to Spider-Man history. I'm definitely going to pick that up and maybe display them together. But back to the Batman shelf, yeah, the Jada Toys Batmobile is awesome. And then back there we've got some NECA props from the movie. So you can barely see it, but back there is a grapnel launcher, and then the Batarang, obviously. These are really cool, inexpensive props from the movie, and yeah, I need to find a better way of displaying them. I don't love that vacuum-formed kind of cheap plastic stands that the Batarang comes with. Apart from anything else, making the stand black means that the actual Batarang doesn't really show off very well, but I'm going to maybe create an acrylic display or find some kind of display solution so I can have both of those iconic prop replicas displayed together. We've got some Topps trading cards back there, just as a bit of, I'm not going to collect all of these, but just as a little bit of Batman 89 ephemera paraphernalia. And I recommend, if you are interested in having any like Topps cards like this, that you open them up and take out the chewing gum, which is slowly going rancid, and what is this, like 30-year-old chewing gum in there that's rotting away and leaching oil into all of those trading cards. So yeah, you can very easily open those packs and then reseal them by heating up the wax with a cigarette lighter, carefully, only if you're an adult or supervised by one. And back there is my childhood copy of Batman 89, and the eagle-eyed viewers out there might notice that it's the Spanish edition. And let me tell you, I do not speak Spanish, but the first time I ever saw this movie was in Spanish on this Spanish copy of the movie. There is a whole story behind that, and it's one I want to tell in a video at some point because it's kind of funny and has a happy ending. But yeah, there's my childhood copy of Batman 89. And then way down here on the bottom shelf, no light getting to these. I don't want to say that these are the rejects, because they're definitely toys that I still wanted to keep out on display. Otherwise I would have boxed them up and put them away, because I have other figures in storage. But these are kind of assorted Marvel figures that don't really fit into any of the other displays. Way back in the dark is the 80th anniversary Iron Man, kind of the Alex Ross version. I never even opened this figure, not because it's not a great figure, but I picked it up and I had other Iron Mans that I wanted out on display. But I needed that classic version, of course. So yeah, that's him. This Marvel Select Titanium Man, I picked him up because, as I said, I had the Hulk on back order for over a year, and in that time the Titanium Man came out and I was like hungry for that Hulk. So I I wanted something to kind of fill the gap. I wanted to get like a big, beefy Marvel Select figure that I could play around with and get a sense of what it was like. So I got that Titanium Man, and I'm really glad I did because it's a fantastic figure. Marvel Select, Diamond Selects, they really excel at those big Marvel characters. As with Beta Ray Bill here, I read the Daniel Warren Johnson Beta Ray Bill limited series last year, and as soon as I was done, I was like, I need to get this Marvel Select figure. So I picked him up. Yeah, I'm definitely in for all the Marvel Select big boys. I'm going to get the Apocalypse that came out not too long ago, and Crimson Dynamo I think has just been announced. Yeah, great figures. A couple more Marvel Legends here that kind of don't fit in anywhere else. The 20th anniversary Toy Biz style Iron Man. I really like the colours on that guy, the yellow and red. I don't know if I prefer a yellow and red Iron Man or a gold and red Iron Man. I don't know which one. The yellow and red is obviously more nostalgic and retro. Yeah, cool figure. I kind of swap him out with the modular Iron Man on my main Marvel Legends display. But yeah, he looks great. And then Peter B. Parker from Into the Spider-Verse. Such a great figure. Like the lightness on that is just looks exactly like he does in the movie. Loads of great character, just loads of personality to this figure. He's got 2 head sculpts, and each head sculpt has just got bags of personality. And then 2 of my childhood toys here. Again, in my Superhero Toys of Christmas Past video, I talked about these micro playsets, and this is my childhood one. I really got some fond memories of playing with those as a kid, and still got all the figures inside there. And then my Spider-Man Classics Series 1 Spider-Man from the year 2000. Again, you know, he has that Mark Bagley look to him. This was my favourite figure for a long time. This is the only real action figure I've kept from my childhood, and he kind of just lived as like a desk friend on every work desk I've ever had, on every bookshelf I've ever had. He's kind of just hung about, stay with me from childhood. He was the ultimate pocket fig for me as a kid. He went on holiday with me, and yeah. Another reason I had to buy that Mafex Spider-Man is because he's very reminiscent of this figure. Yeah, love him. And the last kind of toy shelf is a little bit of a horror shelf, and there's a lot of room for expansion here, but at the minute it's kind of half toys and half books. Oh no, back there you can see my secret shame. It's like the portrait of Dorian Gray. You know, you see my super nice organised toy display with all the lights and stuff, and then that's all the wiring kind of just stuffed there, hidden behind the books. But yeah, up front we've got a NECA Ultimates Boris Karloff Frankenstein, the black and white version. Definitely in for a few more of these. Definitely going to get the Bela Lugosi Dracula, but they are kind of pricey, and I don't have a lot of space for this stuff. Another NECA figure here. This is the Toony Terrors Nosferatu Count Orlok, and yeah, cool figure. Not super posable or anything, but you know, the Toony Terrors line, they're kind of the one step up from Funko Pops in my opinion. But they're cool to have, you know, a little, again, could be like a desk trinket. And then this was a gift from a friend. This is the Higher Toys Open Mouth Predator. Kind of a smaller scale figure, but so much detail, so much paint, great articulation. It's kind of like the NECA figure kind of shrunk down. It has that much paint and detail and stuff. Yeah, really cool figure. A few more little things to talk about here on a half Billy bookcase, which is where I keep a lot of my graphic novels and trade paperbacks and things like that. This is my childhood Game Boy, original DMG Game Boy. It was actually my sister, I think she got it for her birthday, but we shared it, and as she grew up and matured and became an adult, she didn't want it anymore, so she let me have it. I obviously never matured out of wanting a Game Boy, so I restored it, retro-brighted it, fixed it up, and yeah, still got it to this day. Over here I recently got this figure. This is the Jada Toys Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it's really nice. You know, these are they're different to the NECA figures. These are much more toy-like and much more posable. They scale well with Marvel Legends and other 6-inch lines, and I'm really a big fan of these. I'm definitely going to get some more of these too. I've been eyeing up the Wolfman. I'm definitely going to get that. To me, these are much more in line with like the Remco 80s figures. These are like a modern 6-inch version of that, much more toyetic than the NECA figures. When I was a kid, I collected Corgi cars. I had a whole bunch of Corgi diecast cars, and I particularly collected the James Bond Corgi cars. I sold all those off years ago, but I kept the Aston Martin DB5. Obviously, it's the Bond car, the most iconic Bond car. I'm a big James Bond fan, and I recently just retrieved this from my parents' house just to kind of plonk it here as part of the toy collection. When I first designed this set, I knew I wanted to have a lava lamp, especially with the panels to pixels kind of purple and orange colours. It doesn't necessarily read like that on colour, but this is purple and orange. And yeah, again, I'm going for that 90s, 2000 vibe, and a lava lamp is, well, I mean, it's super 60s and 70s as well, but definitely as a kid of the 90s and 2000s, lava lamps were all the rage. This is a kind of a light up Marvel desk light that was kind of cheap, and I got it just to have some practical lighting as part of the set. The light isn't super bright and it kind of gets drowned out by all the studio lights, but it's still cool to have. I'd really like if you could get like the 90s Marvel Comics logo. That would be awesome. Hey, look over here, this is a beer mat from my friend and fellow YouTuber Matty from the channel Stoked. He sent me a little care package with a load of his designs, and I wanted to have something on the set, so I've got this Dracula beer mat. Thanks Matty, yeah, I love all of his designs. And then let's finish with the crown jewel of my collection, as far as I'm concerned. This is the Hasbro, I think it was the 80th anniversary Marvel Legends shield. It's an all-metal Captain America shield. Yeah, just stunning to look at. This is probably my favourite thing I own. It was a gift from my parents during the first year of the COVID pandemic. I super treasure it. It's something I wanted ever since I was a kid. A proper metal Captain America shield. I used to dream about that. And yeah, it was kind of a lifelong goal to get hold of one. I just love the colour on this, like the deep metallic colours and the brushed aluminium. Yeah, I could just look at this thing all day. It's probably my favourite thing I own. There's like one guitar that I would save in a fire before this, but then otherwise I would grab hold of this and use it to escape the fire. I'd use it as a shield. But yeah, had to have this on display. Alright then heroes, thanks for watching this video. As always, you know, you can subscribe to Panels to Pixels, and don't forget to give that bell icon a little ring-a-ding-ding if you never want to miss out on future uploads, which, come on, why would you? Comment on this video, let me know, what do you think of my collection? What am I missing? Tell me. As if I need another excuse to buy some toys. As always, take very good care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.